Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Semi-Pro. Today, me, Josh, and Daniel are here to talk about Stewart Little.
Females of Reddit, what is the sexist thing a plus-size gamer gentleman has told you that has made you want to immediately have sex with him and be his girlfriend? Semi-pro listeners, please let me know.
I hate you. I hate you.
If Elon Musk ever walked up to me,
We're talking about Stewart Little, all right? We're not talking about semi or plus size gamer boys of Reddit. We're talking about Stewart Little.
But Dalton, we are plus-size gamer boys of Reddit.
you might be talking about Stuart.
I would think it's possible that George from Stewart Little grew up to be a plus size gamer boy of Reddit.
I feel like Stuart
grew up
seems
to
like
be
the kind of guy who would browse Reddit.
He grew up to be a animated cartoon character.
Well, no,
true.
he
They
didn't
both
get to
did.
grow up. He
Right.
stayed an animated cartoon character forever.
Correct.
So Stewart Little, how refreshing is it to begin our real sweep? Can't believe they made Stewart Little real.
I'm happy to not watch M. Night Shyamalan movies anymore. That's what I'm happy
I can't wait
about.
to never watch an M. Night Shyamalan movie ever again.
You know, I
other
haven't
than
even seen
Stewart Little again.
I haven't seen The Happening since we watched it. Like I think you might have cured me.
Josh, that it was like a month ago.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have seen it again anyway. No normal person has seen a movie twice in a month that came out in 2008 that's not particularly great.
Well,
No normal person.
Right.
I'm just built different, Dalton. Accept it.
I refuse. So Stewart Little is this beautifully quaint little film. And I love
like
it.
the part when Stuart
Becomes little.
he said I'm littling out, and then he littled all over those guys.
I like the part where he
That was
looks
really good.
he looks at the camera and he says, "I'm Stewart Little," which sounds like a joke, but it's a thing that happened in Stewart Little (parentheses 1990 and 9).
That's the biggest surprise out of this movie is that this film came out in 1999.
Yeah, no, genuinely. Like I knew it was like, you know,
Well, it was
old.
like
but I
I think it
figured
was
like
early 2000s.
right. I thought that I was older than this movie, but this movie is older than me.
Me and this movie are the same age.
Same.
This movie could be married right now.
Yeah.
So let's break down the plot. Let's break down the plot of Stewart and Little, 1990 and 9. So
Daniel's just thinking about his plus-sized gamer.
So we open in this little New Yorkian family home.
Little?
Yes. We're gonna
Get it.
keep a tally of all the times we say
name.
little. So we open in this little this quaint little home with some great set design. Bobbin watched the movie with us. He's not here for the discussion, but he watched the movie with us. And that's one of the things he also commented on. Just like the set design is great. All the set pieces are very well done, and we'll talk more about that a little later. But we open, and there's this little boy named George, and Dr. House is there, and his wife. Dr. House is George's father, and
Yes.
George is like, "Hey, you're going to the adoption agency to adopt a replacement for the brother of mine that passed away." That's my headcanon, and they don't actually mention it. I want a little brother, not a big brother. And they took that to heart because they go to the adoption agency and they're looking at all these kids. And then they start talking to a mouse voiced by Michael J. Fox named Stewart Little.
Well, they're looking at all these kids, and this mouse is giving them context, and he's bigging up all of his adoption brothers and sisters, and he's like, "Hey, this guy's great at maths. This guy can do really well at sports," and he's just he's hyping them up, and
Which is
they
super
start-
wholesome.
Oh yeah, Stuart Little is the most wholesome character in the world ever.
Until he tries
Yeah.
to kill that cat.
Well, the
That
cat
was
was trying to kill him. That's
self-defense.
self-defense. Yeah.
That's
Right.
true. That's true. That's
Come
true.
on. Don't just come on.
So they decide to adopt Stewart Little, and the woman who runs the adoption agency is super racist towards mice, which is a running theme throughout the movie. This movie's about racism. So
Right, like many M. Night Shyamalan movies.
Oh, I guess we
Like
should
many
mention
M. Night Shyamalan movies, it has a social commentary.
we should mention that M. Night Shyamalan did write this movie. That's our transition from Shyamalan sweep to Stewart Little sweep, and by that I mean real sweep.
Right.
M. Night Shyamalan did write this.
He wrote it, but he didn't direct it.
Correct, and he's not the main writer. He's just one of the writers on the movie, and I know which part he wrote. We'll talk about it when we get there. So they adopt Stewart Little and they bring him home and things are nice. And then the cat tries to eat him, but it's okay because they make the cat spit him out. The cat's name is Snowbell, and it's the best cat actor in the world. Once again, we'll continue to talk about this as we go. So then George comes home from school and he seems a little distraught at the fact that his parents adopted a mouse instead of a human.
By a little distraught, you mean horribly racist towards the mouse.
The thing is, when you first discover that, I think you're allowed to be a little bit weirded out. It's not exactly an everyday occurrence, but he outright hates this
Speak
dude.
for yourself. This happened to me like once a week as a kid.
They kept him trying to replace me.
I coughed.
Yeah,
this movie made me cough.
He hates his mouse brethren. And the movie's just chugging along. It shows the next day his parents tuck him in and give him a nice little kiss in his giant bed.
The comically large bed.
I think that is not the next day. I think it's the nighttime of the same day.
Some would say.
Perhaps. The next day, however,
The next day, he brushes his
Stuart
teeth
wakes
with a
up.
big toothbrush.
Yeah,
they
don't
give
forget.
him a tiny miniature version of everything. They get a custom miniature sink and a miniature bottle of mouthwash, but he still has a normal sized toothbrush, which I think is funny because
Well,
he's got
it's-
a big old toothbrush on his little mouse face.
It's hard to find a miniature toothbrush. Miniature mouthwash is easy. You just go to the travel section at Walmart. You just go to the travel section, get a little travel size.
that was smaller than a travel sized thing of mouthwash.
In New York, that tiny little miniature bathroom set that Stewart Little lived in, that costs about $6,000.
In New York, I Millie Rock.
Yeah.
Hide it in my sock.
So they have the little like morning montage. George is still not the best friend of Stuart. They're not getting along. He's
still
racist.
very apprehensive of him, yeah.
And so, but they brush their teeth together, and it shows that they're not so different. Stuart and George, they're doing the same things. And they give Stuart Little, instead of mice teeth, they give him human teeth, which is fun. I like that little detail. But then
I like
George
his
gets
funny little
naked
teeth.
in front of his brother, and he drops his clothes onto his brother.
Well, he takes his top off.
No, his pants were there too. It was all of his pajamas. And he drops his clothes onto Stuart,
And then shoves them down a chute.
and then throws him down the laundry chute.
And then he shoots Stuart Little.
He shoots him.
Kills him.
Throws him down the laundry chute, and he falls directly into the laundry basket, to which Stuart Little's mother throws him in the washing machine.
Well, she picks up the clothes and throws them in the washing machine. He just happens to be within the clothes.
Well, yes. And then turns it on, and he begins to drown.
And he almost dies.
He's like knocking on the washing machine, and she thinks someone's at the door, so she runs to the door, but there's no one there.
That was a pretty good bit. I liked that bit.
But by the time she gets back, the washing machine is full. And the
And
water
then
is
Stuart-
clear, and she didn't put any detergent in there, so there's no detergent in the washing machine. There's none. There's no detergent in there, or the water would be all bubbly and full of
Then
detergent.
how did he cough up a bubble?
I don't know. I
And
guess
why does the doctor say that he's full of detergent?
he was drinking detergent of his own accord.
he was
was just
doing the
the-
Tide
that
Pod
was the
challenge.
only way to get by in the orphanage.
That was an early attempt of the cat to kill him. Is replace his toothpaste with detergent.
His tooth. Replace his tooth with detergent.
His tooth with a cyanide pill.
So then they save him, and the
funny
doctor
one.
comes in, and the doctor's like, "That little fella swallowed a lot of detergent. You're lucky he's alive, but he's gonna be fine." And then he's just fine after that.
Right. We haven't mentioned the cat yet, who appears when Stuart gets
have,
taken
actually.
home.
We have actually.
we have a couple times.
The only time up till now that the cat has been on screen, we've talked about him.
Well, he's been on because we didn't talk about him when he visited him at night in his bed.
True.
I think we might have actually.
We didn't.
I think I did. I think I said something.
I think
You
Dan
guys
thought
ignored
about
me.
it, but then he didn't say
I
anything.
think I projected my thoughts into all of the listeners' heads, but I didn't put them into
But
your heads. My bad.
the family owns a cat, and it speaks to Stuart
And his
Little,
name
but not
is
to the
his name
family.
is Snowbell, not Snowball, like I
Right.
thought throughout the entirety of the movie.
And he speaks to Stuart Little, and he's also a racist towards Stuart Little. But
Which makes sense.
But that one makes
internalized.
sense because
Right, it's internalized racism.
yeah, right.
Oh,
Don't like that one.
this is horrible. Yeah. So Snowbell does
The
not
movie's
like
just
Stuart
moving
Little
along.
because he's a cat, and Stuart Little's a mouse. And cats and mice. It's a classic Tom and Jerry situation.
Right.
And hijinks do ensue. Snowbell, in the scene previous, at the nighttime, is upset because it's a mouse with a pet cat, and that's not the order of the world. Mice are
Right,
or
he's-
cats are supposed to eat them.
He's worried that he's going to be ridiculed.
Yeah, the thing is, he only cares because it'll damage his street rep with the cool alley cats.
Right. He's worried because he's like, oh, they're going to make fun of me again.
Which, yeah,
the
of course
first
they are.
child already died, and now I have a pet mice for an owner.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
Snowbell killed the first child?
No, because
Probably not.
he doesn't have any reason to, unless the first
Yeah.
child was also a mouse.
That is.
Josh says the word mouse challenge. Impossible.
My brain keeps telling me to say
Okay, so-
mice because
So hold on.
I've
You
never
know how
mentioned a single
in
mouse.
in the book, he wasn't a mouse. He was just like a weird deformed boy with
He
mouse-like
was a
features.
human mouse hybrid.
What
from
if
YouTube.
that? What if that's what their original child was? Was a
Mm.
weird human mouse hybrid.
This is
That's why
this
they.
is-
That's why they liked Stuart Little so much, and because he was a weird human mouse boy hybrid, that's why Snowbell, not Snowball, killed him.
I like that.
That's my
This is
that's my
like
new theory.
It's one of those movies that's like a sequel to the book.
Yeah, but
Right?
Stuart Little doesn't die in the book. And he's
No,
still
but
adopted in the book.
In between the book and
No,
movie,
he does.
in between the book and movie, he passes away because of Snowbell.
He's still adopted in the book.
Nah.
Yeah, so this can be their second attempt.
Okay, all right, sure. So Snowbell's upset.
They
also-
adopted two different
Mouse children.
right, both of them
That's
named
actually
Stuart.
that's why they go for Stuart. Is he's also a mouse named Stuart? And they're like, oh,
Right.
mine's also my
They have a
first
type.
son.
And the reason George is so upset is because it didn't work the first time, and so he's more upset this time because he knew it didn't work out.
Another mouse brother.
George is upset because he thought he killed the first Stuart Little, and now it's come back to haunt him with the second.
So the family comes over to like greet the extended family. They come over to greet their new nephew or grandson or whatever, because he's been adopted. They get him all these gifts like a bowling ball and
And a bicycle.
It gets increasingly funnier because they're all things that he can't use. This is where we see the urn on the mantle of the Little family.
Right.
We know that all the grandparents are there, as well as presumably all the siblings. So it has to be the urn of someone in the immediate family, right? Theoretically, unless it's like the
I
mom's
think all
mother.
the grandparents were there.
Right.
I think there was just one set of grandparents.
Yes,
Right.
well, that's what I meant on the Little side of the family.
Right.
So my assumption is that that's their first child, which I would assume is a Shyamalan edition. There was a whole scene in the script that was deleted. It was like a backstory with the first child dying. But they all bring him these gifts and they're super accepting. The extended family is super, super supportive of them adopting a mouse, and it's very, very wholesome. Like it seems like they're going to be upset about it, but then they're like, oh, he's adorable. We love this little guy.
Horrible.
Right, he's a fun little fella.
And so that is nice. And I love the way that this movie handles it, where like people don't know how to react at first, but then they're just supportive in any of the positive characters, except for
like-
George.
it's like they're apprehensive, but not because of their judgments or whatever, but just because they don't want to offend Stuart. Like they just want him to be comfortable and happy and wholesome.
Right. Because this movie's about racism. So George gets upset when he sees all the gifts. Number one, because none of them are for him, which is something he says. He's like, "Hey, are any of these gifts for me?" And everybody's like, "No, they're for the brother.
Hate you now.
The brother that was adopted. You're an older brother now, and he was adopted, so we got him presents." And George gets upset because he's like, "Hey, how's he going to play with a bowling ball or ride a bike? He's a mouse." And then
he picks up the bowling ball and he just drops it on top of Stewart Little, and it just goes splat.
in fact, the direct quote is, "He's not my brother. He's a mouse." And then he storms off.
Right.
And
he
the extended
can't call
family,
him that.
the extended family just immediately leaves, which is also a fun
Right.
little character bit. They're just like, "Well, things are uncomfortable.
All right.
I'm gonna go," which is how family get-togethers tend to go.
Right.
The second something uncomfortable happens, it's either a full-out fight or everybody leaves. So the next morning, Dr. House and his mom try to talk to George, but they don't really get anywhere with the conversation. And they take Stuart shopping for some clothes. And they go shopping at a doll store for doll clothes. And they get him some nice, swanky... This was before. I missed this part. This all happened before the family get together. Because
That's why they were shopping.
Yeah, they bought him clothes for the family get together, but it doesn't really matter. So George and Dr. House, they
Point
have a
is,
talk.
He was dripping.
Right.
Yeah.
Stewart Little was drippy. They have a little
He
talk
was
about
iced up.
all that happened and all of the apprehension and whatever. And George decides he's not going to enter the boat race because he is scared of the bully, who admittedly looks like a pretty frightening bully if you're a child. And so he decides he's not going to enter. Whatever, hijinks ensue. I'm assuming George goes to school, but Stuart doesn't, which doesn't make any sense. Why isn't Stuart in school? He's also a child. So George is at school. Snowbell.
Well, do we have an age for Stuart?
That's what I was going to ask while we were watching it, because he acts and talks like he's
grown.
at least an older child than George.
He
Like he's a
talks and
30-year-old
acts and
man.
Sounds like,
Right.
like Michael J. Fox.
Correct.
I don't know. I assumed younger because George asked for a little brother. But he's also a mouse, so it's really hard to gauge his age. They only live to be like 3. So
Yeah, but this is Stewart Little universe rules where the mice can talk and
drive cars.
so it's maybe and toy cars have engines in them. But we'll get to that.
We'll get there. So they go and no. I'm assuming George is at school. Parents are at work. Stuart's home alone. Why are you leaving this child home alone on his second day in your house? But that's besides the point.
Especially when you have an animal that actively tried to kill him.
Right.
Very
It's like it was the
time
first
he
thing that
walked
happened.
into his house.
Well, they had a conversation
Yeah,
with Snowbell.
They
They said,
Well-
"Don't eat him. He is a member of the family." And then they put him down on the ground and thought that was good enough.
I mean, it was like he didn't eat him after
Yeah,
that.
it's true. He got the point. But his friend Monty comes over, and the cat's friend Monty, Snowbell's friend, another cat named Monty, comes over and tries to steal food from Snowbell. And Snowbell's
Monty.
like, "No, it's meatloaf. It'll give you gas." And he's like, "Oh, well, I guess I'll eat the meatloaf anyway." And then there's a fart joke. But he sees Stuart and starts laughing at Snowbell, which is where I don't know what cats they got for this movie, because this cat was also a great actor. This is
my
this is the
gosh.
part where I want to talk about the cat's acting, because Snowbell is like perfect, and he's acting against CGI nothingness, which I guess meant they could kind of CGI Stuart around the cat. But this cat is like every time he turns his head, it's in the right direction, and there's great character work with Snowbell just in his movements. Like, you can mute it and know exactly what you're supposed to be feeling when it comes to what this cat is saying. Like, when it's ominous, he moves slowly, and it's just great. And I really like it. And then there's a scene with Monty, the other cat, where he starts laughing at Snowbell, and the cat rolls over and he's got his hands on his belly and he's rolling back and forth laughing. It's fantastic. I don't know where they got these cats, but they're the best in the business. I really want to watch Stewart Little 2 just to see if the replacement cat they got for Snowbell is as good as this one.
I mean, the 3 minutes that we watched after watching Stewart Little, it looked like the same cat. By which I mean it looked like the same breed.
It was a fluffy white cat.
Yeah, and the hair, it was a different cat. I noticed.
My cat dart was going off.
The only thing I could tell was that they were holding it, so you couldn't see the movements. You couldn't see him act. But anyway, so Monty is making fun of Snowbell, and then he leaves, and then Snowbell threatens Stuart, and he's like, "Hey, you ruined my street credit. I hate you.
I'm gonna eat you."
And then that's the end of that scene. It's pretty much over. No, George is home during this scene because this is where Stuart runs away from Snowbell into George's room and shuts the door behind him, and he goes into the basement where George has his little model Western town, and he pretends to shoot guns.
These parents left both of their kids home alone?
Mm-hmm.
That's a different movie.
Yeah, this is not Macaulay Culkin in this movie.
No, it is, I think. He says,
it's
"Oh my goodness, I'm home alone."
It's the kid they got.
Stuart Little crossover. It's Macaulay Culkin getting attacked by the wet bandits and Stuart Little being attacked by the cats, and they have to fend them off together.
This kid actor is the kid that they tried to get to replace Macaulay Culkin in the late 90s by putting him in 2 or 3 movies, and it just didn't work out because he wasn't as good of a child actor.
Do you mean Stuart Little 1 and 2?
Well, no,
Yes.
he was in Little Vampire or Little Monsters.
Talking about little vampires.
You keep talking about Little Vampire.
I watched that movie several times as a child.
I don't think
Why? I've never even heard of this.
Don, I'm the guy who watches bad movies, and I've never seen this movie.
Josh has seen
it's not necessarily bad. It's just
80 times just this week.
It's just a kids movie from the 90s. I don't understand.
No, it's just
what's your obsession with it, man?
Well, because it's the only movie I remember him from other than Stewart Little and Stewart Little 2. And he's been in a bunch of stuff recently, like a bunch of super low budget.
Yeah, he was in A Christmas Story.
Schlocky
Aren't
movies.
they making like a... Did I imagine that they're making a Christmas story
like a sequel
it's
or something?
Yeah, it's like about his
well, they already
kid
did the
or
sequel.
something. Right.
What? Right, no, but
This is like they're bringing back like
a requel.
Right. They're doing the new sequel thing.
Cool.
Oh, I didn't realize this, but the kid from Stewart Little's been in the MCU.
Yeah, he's the guy from Iron Man, and also
He was in Interns
Spider-Man No Way
of
Home.
Field.
he was the guy that Jeff Bridges yelled at, and then he was also in
Far From Home.
Spider-Man No Way Home.
Cool. I didn't know that. So Dr. House. No. We're in the basement, and Stuart Little is bonding with his brother George, and it's a great little. It's a great little.
He's in an
scene.
Old West little toy set thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And George is like, "Hey, quit distracting me. I'm doing things." And Stuart Little's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, you have a train?" And so his brother George ties him up on the train tracks and tries to murder him with the train. What turns out they're just playing.
Turns out he just tied himself up with his tail.
And he jumps out of the way, and then they bond a little bit, and they're talking about George's boat because George has dropped out of the boat race, and Stuart Little is like, "Hey, that's a cool boat. Why aren't you building it?" And he's like, "Well, I dropped out because I didn't want to whatever." And Stuart's like, "Well, I'll help you out." And then George says, "I don't know that I'm ready for a brother." Stuart says, "How about a friend?" He says, "Yeah, I guess I can be friends with a mouse." And then they start working on the boat together. And from then on out, it's like a little switch in George's brain where he likes Stewart Little.
That's his character arc. He learns to not be a racist towards Mouse.
Right, which is fun, and I like it. And from here on out, that stuff is probably my least favorite part of the movie because the rest of the movie is so wholesome, and there's already an antagonist with Snowbell. So I don't love the stuff with George and Stuart where they don't get along, but it's fine. It's not bad. It's just not my favorite.
it's barely part of the movie, really. Like there's 2 or 3 scenes with it.
It's the first half hour or so. It's the
2 or 3
first
scenes.
third of the movie.
Yeah, but there's only 2 or 3 scenes where it's explicitly like a part of it. Like there's the gift scene and this scene and the first scene.
You mean the plot of the first third of the movie?
No, because most of those scenes, George isn't in the scene for most of the time.
Yeah, whatever. So they go to the boat race. I'm sure something happens with Snowbell in between because Snowbell features heavily in this movie, which is great because he is the antagonist. And so they go to the boat race. And the boat breaks. Like George has Stewart Little carry the remote, and it's like 3 times his size, and he's struggling so much to carry it because presumably it's super heavy for this little mouse. And
It's a miracle that he also doesn't get like stepped on by these people.
yeah,
Right.
and
Or just crushed by the remote that was twice his
His
size.
size, yeah.
definitely should mention everyone in this scene super drippy. I mean, dripped
This is true.
out. Dr. House is like, he's wearing this like red shirt with these like little white patterns on it and a sweater vest. George is wearing the hardest shirt I've ever seen in my life because it's like plaid but with a white collar and it's short sleeve and it's got like little white rings around the sleeves with bright red
Little
buttons.
red buttons.
Hard.
Dalton got his new personality and his new wardrobe.
And
That's a
Actually,
9-year-old child.
I do want to mention that like the rest of the movie, like outside of the Little family and obviously the talking mice, mice.
Yeah.
I
Mices.
mices, talking mices and the talking cats. Like the movie's pretty set in realism. Like there's nothing too wacky. It's not like Cat in the Hat land or anything. But then the Little family themselves are also normal but exaggerated. Like they're colorful and they're vibrant, but they're not too out there. And so it makes them stand out. And just
we talked about it while we were watching it, and it's like what a real world take on a cartoon universe would be like.
right.
But-
You said it had like Roger Rabbit vibes.
Yeah, very very similar to that, where it's like the world is normal, but these like exotic talking mice just happen to exist in it, and this family just happens to like colors and happen to be like the nicest people in the world.
And happened to be drippy.
Correct. Yes. Also, at some point in what we talked about before, Stuart mentions that he would like to meet his real parents because that's something that adopted kids struggle with. And he's like, hey, I would like to meet my real parents. And so they go and they talk to the adoption agency and they're like, no, we can't do that, but I'll look into it and see if there's anything we can do. And so they go back home. Now we're back at the boat race. The remote is broken. George is really upset because he just got his courage to actually enter this race in the first place.
Right, and he just got bullied by like a rich kid whose dad bought him a pre-made boat and everything.
Also, and while we're on the topic of drippy, Stewart Little is in this little captain's outfit, and it goes hard. So then the boat race starts, and George is sad because he's like, I can't enter, and Dr. House is like, well, we should just go home. But then they look over, and Stewart Little is driving the boat because presumably this boat also has its own engine, like the car that we'll talk about later. So he drives, and it's this great little toy boat race that is way better than it has any business being, which is sort of the theme of this movie, because the way it's shot is so perfect. Because these boats are on the water, and it's not like they're trying to do like a miniature set type thing, because they make it obvious that they're toy boats with the size of the water splashes and all that kind of stuff. But it's incredible because it's shot from like the perspective of there's a tiny little mouse-sized camera recording it, and it's right up next to the boats. And I love it. And there's so much tension in this boat race because Stewart Little almost gets his boat sunk and he almost dies. And the question is like, are they going to win? And you actually wonder what's going to happen. And it's just such
I thought he was going to die, honestly.
Yeah, right. I thought they were going to drown him.
That's also the running theme in this movie. Is Stuart Little nearly dies in just so many ways.
Yeah, there are probably like 5 or 6 different times where he almost dies.
Most of it's by drowning.
Well, 2 of them. Oh no,
doesn't he really-
there's the sewer.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's,
Stewart Little.
and it comes back, and there's more stuff like this a little later, but just this idea that they took the care required to shoot this scene that way, like where it's from Stuart's perspective, and it makes the boats look like normal sized boats. It's fun. And then they wind up winning the race, and George is super excited, and him and his brother have bonded again. And there's one point where one of the bullies says, like, I'm going to kill that stupid mouse or whatever. And George says, he's not a mouse. He's my brother. And so that tension is gone, and it's done, and it's wholesome, and it's a very, very fun scene. And then we move on, and the family comes over to celebrate the win. They take a big picture together. Stewart Little is yet again dripped out in his Bond white coat with black pants. And it's great. It's a great little scene. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of that. The movie from here on out, I love every aspect of. Favorite movie of all time. And now we're going to take a pause to hear from some advertisements. Welcome back.
Right, it's just pretty good. It's just showing along. They say Stuart Little wins, and he's celebrating with his family, and they're all happy. They take a nice little photo where they're all dripped out, and they
It's true. Stewart Little had the little tuxedo on, and it went forward.
Stuart and George had the James Bond fit,
Right.
and then his parents show up, which kind of throws a wrench and a damper on the whole thing, and his parents show up, and Stuart, the Little family's first instinct is, these must be Stuart's parents that we were asking about. And they're like, are you his friends that happen to be older?
Are you my small child's adult friends?
And they have to be like, no, we're his parents.
Which is interesting because they're not who you would expect, like, this mouse's parents to be. But I guess he was raised in the adoption agency, so that would make sense.
It surprised me because I was like, for some reason I just didn't think they talk about his parents. You mentioned many times across various different talks that the movie's twist was that his parents weren't his real parents. And every time you said that, I just assumed you were talking about his human parents that he got adopted by, and I was like, so when his
Wow, really?
when his quote unquote actual parents turn up, it was quite surprising.
And so the dad's eating peanuts, and it's great because he takes bites out of them, which is funny because you don't bite peanuts. You just throw like 6 of them in your mouth. But he's a mouse.
He's a mouse.
It's great.
And his wife hates him for eating the peanuts that they ate out.
Right. So Stuart goes with his parents, and everybody is really sad about it because they've all just started to bond. George gives him this little toy car that has a real engine in it, and his dad drives it, and they all go home to this abandoned golf course that they've turned into a house for Mouse. They've turned into the Mouse house. And they start doing this thing, and the parents get real sad because they miss Stuart. And this is where we start to get hints of what the Shyamalan twist of this movie is. Because the adoption lady comes over, and it does play just like a Shyamalan twist does in most Shyamalan movies, like with the build up to it and the actor's response and all of these things. So they come.
It feels almost like it comes out of nowhere because the movie's kind of goofy up to this point, and then it hits you with this. Would you like to talk about the reveal, Dalton?
I would love to. I would love to talk about this reveal because it's one of my favorite parts of the movie. So the parents come over, or the adoption lady comes over to the Little household, and she sits down and she's like, Stuart's parents were in a horrible accident. They were shopping for soup, and the cans fell on them and crushed them in a mushroom soup incident. And the parents are, of course, the Littles are, of course, they're devastated, and they're like, well, does Stuart know? Is he okay? And they're like, well, no, this happened years ago, which is the twist. And it snap zooms on everybo's face as they're shocked.
Right,
and then it snap zooms on Snowbell.
The dolly zoom. It does like the dolly zoom on the woman.
Yeah, and then it goes in on Snowbell's face, and he's also freaked out because it turns out he hired these mice, and by hired I mean threatened these mice to adopt.
Well, he didn't hire them.
No, the cat mafia
Smokey, the
did.
mob boss cat.
Yeah.
hired
Yeah, well, we
them.
haven't really talked about him, so I was just gonna
right.
The Godfather cat.
There's a cat mafia in this universe, is what we're
Right,
getting
and
at.
the Godfather is called Smokey, and he even sounds like the Godfather.
He does. He talks like Marlon
Right.
Brando from The
He is-
Godfather.
He is an Italian American, is what we're saying.
Right. He does talk like that. And it's great. But they threaten these mice to take Stuart and pretend to be their parents so that he can get out of the little household, so that Snowbell is not a cat with a mouse as his owner.
Right, and they're gonna kill Stuart Little, because isn't the idea
Well, they
that-
decide they're
Kill
going to
you.
They decide they're going to kill Stuart Little after
I thought the plan was that
after they find out. After the Littles find out, that's when they decide they're going to kill Stuart Little. Before they were just going to let him go.
I thought they were gonna kill him with the family, because otherwise the family wouldn't know that they were gonna try and kill him, would they?
Well, that
Actually, no,
well they said
no, sorry. He just wants to get back to his family, and they're like, yeah, you probably should.
so. The dad comes home. Dad Mouse, fake Dad Mouse, comes home in his car, and that's
His car that he was gifted by a
Correct.
small child
correct.
that works perfectly with an engine. And
Yes.
do you think that car takes gas? Like what?
Every like 3 weeks or so, they have to put in 2 new AA batteries.
But no, it has an engine, because when it starts, it does the engine sound.
Yeah, that baby purring.
it's
So-
an electric car. But it's actually the first
No,
ever
because
Tesla.
electric cars don't make
an
noise,
engine.
Josh. It has an engine. It has a gas engine.
Yeah, everyone's got to start somewhere.
What?
What? So he comes home from a meeting with the mafia cat, because basically what they offered him was they offered this family protection if they take Stuart Little away. But now that the family knows that it's a setup, they say, "Hey, we need Stuart Little so that we can kill him." And they come home to tell Stuart Little that, but they're distraught because they don't want to see their fake son murdered. So they tell him, "Hey, go back to the Little household. You'll be safe there, but you need to go now." And so Stuart Little hops in the little car, and the engine starts again because it's a gas-powered vehicle. And then with like it, and it works. Like, it's not like a remote control car. It
No,
has
it
a
has a
gas.
steering wheel
It has
and everything.
brakes.
Hides it from in the thing.
Yeah.
It's also, in terms of like the production, it's a real car, and it looks like it's the best thing they could have done, because it looks really good when it's driving.
Oh, it looks great. I'm assuming it's just a really nice remote
It's a
control
remote
car.
control,
But with
yeah,
the,
they like added in something afterwards to give it an engine.
with the,
but, like,
within the
it's just-
context
No,
of the movie,
they just actually gave it an engine.
yeah, they built a real tiny scaled car. They got Henry
Just after
Ford
they
on the
found
phone.
a talking small mouse.
So he's driving home, and at this time, the Littles they're looking for Stuart. They make little signs that he's been kidnapped, and they start posting them all over the place. They cut his
get
little
it.
picture out of the family photo and then put it back on the counter for put it back on the mantle for whatever reason. And so they go out, everybody in the family, the extended family, everybody, they're all looking for Stuart Little. And they go to all these different places, and Stuart gets home and nobody's there. And he comes in, but Snowbell is there, and Snowbell's like, "Hey, dude, they hate you. Like these guys, this family you thought you had, they hate you. Look, they even cut you out of the family photo. They were so happy that you were gone that they threw a party, and now they're all out celebrating the fact that you're gone because they hate you. You need to leave." So Stuart Little hops in his car, and he starts to drive away again. But he's being chased by every mouse every cat in the city, because they all want Stuart Little dead. All of this mafia, the cat mafia, they're all chasing him, and he winds up in the park. And he climbs a tree, and Snowbell also climbs the tree, and this is where Snowbell has his redemption arc, because he starts talking to Stuart.
Stuart's up in the tree, and he's just contemplating life and everything. You know, what's he meant to do now? Snowball climbs up, and the rest of the cats are egging him on. They're going, "Hey, kill him, kill him!" And and Snowbell kind of has a moment of realization. He's like, hey, he's not too bad.
Right.
He calls him his family.
Yeah.
He says, no, he's my family. I can't kill him.
I couldn't possibly kill my mouse friend. So then the other cats just decide to kill Stewart Little anyway. They're like, yeah, no, this is ridiculous. We're just going to kill him.
They decide to jump Snowbell the cat.
Right. But Snowbell winds up saving Stuart because Stuart's up on a tiny branch because he's a mouse, and the cats are all on a bigger branch, but it's cracked. So Snowbell starts stepping on it, and he snaps it, and they all fall in the river. We missed the sewer scene, but it's really not important. It's just Stewart Little running away.
The coolest thing in that scene was Stewart Little whipping the little mini roadster fast backwards down a hill. That was cool. I like that.
And it's another scene much like the boat race scene where it's shot so perfectly that it feels like the scene from Jurassic Park where the Jeep is being chased by the T-Rex, but it's not. It's a tiny little car driven by a tiny little mouse being chased by normal sized cats.
By a cat mafia.
And it's great. But anyway, so they're in the tree, the branch snaps, all the cats fall in the river. Seems like it's over, but Smokey, the mob boss cat, decides he's still going to jump
Marlon
Snowbell.
Brando cat.
Right. And so Stewart Little pulls back a branch with part of the branch behind him, which is something I paused and went back on just to make sure you guys saw it. And he lets go of the branch, and the branch disintegrates through his body and then hits Smokey the cat in the face, and he falls into the river. Stewart Little and Snowbell get down, and they start walking home. Smokey runs away and then gets attacked by dogs.
And is killed.
It presumably is dead.
Smokey gets killed.
Smokey the cat dies of gang violence. 1999.
Smokey the cat gets murdered in a bad neighborhood.
There's a little bit with Monty where they establish that he's still friends with Snowbell, so that he can come back in the sequel, Stewart Little 2.
Right.
So they establish that they're still buddies, despite the fact that he tried to eat his owner. Which I'm going to be honest, if I'm a cat, I'm not going to take that. But yeah, so they go back home and everybody's happy to see Stuart, and they hug, and then George pulls down the curtain, and then the end is written on the screen, and that's the end of the movie. And it
says Finn.
It says the end ?
It says Stewart Little will return in
the
Stewart
Avengers.
Little 2.
Well, we didn't watch for after the credits to see if there's an after credit scene.
That is true. I did like the little 2000s credit montage.
It was one of my favorites of those maybe ever.
Their little Tom and Jerry sequence. That was pretty fun.
Yeah. Snowbell still wants to eat Stuart, even though they just established.
Well, I'm convinced that was a flashback sequence that took place before their little bonding moment.
Yeah, it's possible. I wonder if in the sequel,
headcanon. Your headcanon is about a dead child. Mine's about a cat and a mouse's unlikely friendship.
Well, Dan, yours is also about the mouse mutant hybrid.
Well, that's not a headcanon. That's just true.
That's just the movie. I also, I'm curious as to. I really want to watch Stewart Little 2 for the podcast, which we may do a sequel sweep at some point where we watch sequels to movies we've already seen.
Well, yeah, we've discussed it.
But I really want to see if in Stewart Little 2, if Snowbell and Stuart continue to get along, or if there's still like some tension because of the primal urge of the cat.
They said it up in this movie. They get along, but they're not besties or anything like that. Like. Snowbell's still got a bit of apprehensiveness.
He called him family.
Yeah, but then he goes back on it afterwards, and he goes, maybe family.
Do you like every member of your family all the time?
Yeah, but I don't think they set that up in this movie as much as they set up like Snowbell like being the hard older brother type thing, where he's like, yeah, whatever.
That's still like you can still have beef because of that.
Yeah.
All right, man. Whatever you say. Whatever you have made up as part of this movie, we've all done it too. But yeah, so I'm very curious for whenever we inevitably watch Stewart Little 2 to see how it holds up versus the first one. But I I knew I was going to enjoy this movie going into it because it's a movie I really liked as a kid. I watched like the first half of it somewhat recently and was pleasantly surprised at how well it held up. And also coming off the back of watching 5 M. Night Shyamalan movies in a row, like I knew this movie could not fail.
I'm curious about how much M. Night Shyamalan wrote in this movie.
I would assume the twist.
Right. Well, definitely at least the twist. Probably most of the racism stuff too.
Yeah.
They're just writing the movie. Like they're just finding this fun little movie about a mouse, and M. Night Shyamalan kicks open the door. There needs to be a twist, and he just scribbles it down in a crayon on the script.
If we would have liked this movie as much had we watched it like right before the M. Night Suite, like say we watched this movie after like Daddy's Home 2, would we still have praised it this much?
I think we would have still enjoyed it.
Yeah, we definitely would have still enjoyed it.
But I think, I don't know, there's a lot that this movie really has going for it, even outside of comparing it to the horrible
not
things.
Being an M. Night movie.
Outside of that, there's still a lot going on in this movie that's well done. I mean, the set design is fantastic. The little family is such a wholesome family. All of the acting from both the immediate family and the extended family, outside of George, but he's not even horrible. I mean, other movies that came out this year with a child actor that age would be The Phantom Menace, and this kid is better than Jake Lloyd was in The Phantom Menace.
Yeah, and Jake Lloyd like beats prostitutes or something. So,
and well, that's because this movie didn't have George Lucas in it. If it
Right.
had George Lucas, then it would have been a very different movie. It would have been every character would have been CG entirely. The cat would have been some very, very, very bad Jewish caricature.
I mean, there were a lot of racial caricatures in this movie, so I don't know that that's the best comparison to make.
What there?
it's so much racial. It was just
the cats.
It was implied. It was implied gang violence.
Right. It was. Yeah. It wasn't.
I wouldn't
like
say racism.
Well, no, there was definitely racism. It just wasn't racial caricatures.
Right.
There was lots of racism.
Right.
In universe racism.
The director of this movie, he's directed some things of note since. He was a co-director on The Lion King. He was a producer on Stewart Little 2. He was a producer on The Haunted Mansion. He recently directed a movie called Paws of Fury, The Legend of
Oh, I know that one.
Hank, that just came out, Mr. Peabody and Sherman. He also directed that movie. He worked on some shorts for Roger Rabbit, which makes sense.
That explains why this has like similarities.
Yeah, so he has some connection to Roger Rabbit in some ways. I mean, other than that, nothing super, super important.
I looked up, so there's two credited screenwriters on this. One of them is M. Night, and the other one is some other guy who has only written 2 movies, which is Stewart Little and Christopher Robin.
Interesting.
I looked up the trivia,
admittedly.
and apparently, in according to the trivia, Snowbell is hostile to Stuart in this movie, but in Stewart Little 2, he and Stuart become friends. So I guess they do keep that character arc.
See, told you it was a flashback.
The director of this movie also worked on the cartoon series, but anyway, so it's there are so many. Everything is so well acted. Even the cat, like that's
enough about the cat, man.
well, but it just
Stop
goes
talking
into this
about the
idea that this movie is there aren't any missing links in this movie. I'm not saying it's a perfect movie because it's not. It's a dumb little kids film. It's a dumb little kids film, but it tries way harder than it should be to be something good. And this is the movie that always pops into my head when I think of, after I saw the first half of it about a year or so ago, this is the movie that pops into my head when I think about a movie that is better than it has any right to be. Because it's Stewart Little. Like, it shouldn't be good, but it is? Question mark? And it's like...
Yo?
And I don't know. I really enjoy Stewart Little. What can I say? What can I say?
All my fellas love Stewart Little.
So Dalton, best movie of all time or worst movie of all time?
Oh, best movie ever, easily. This is the best movie we've watched since Daddy's Home 2. And it might
That is
be better than
That's
Daddy's
not-
Home 2, but it
that's not
doesn't have a
very-
rewatch value like
That's not
Daddy's Home 2
very,
has.
hard.
I think it's got a rewatch value, just not like I'd rewatch this movie like in
Once
like a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like whereas Daddy's Home, I'd rewatch that like next month. I'd rewatch that now. Like
I
if you
could
guys said
yeah.
let's abandon the entire podcast and just watch Daddy's Home 2 right now, I'd say yeah.
Right.
Can someone say that, please? Can someone
I
do that,
will.
please?
I will eventually.
Please?
I will when I have kids. I'll show this movie to my kids. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
like
I'll
'cause
also show this movie to your kids. I'll show your kids Daddy's Home too.
there's something so wholesome about this movie.
This really is it's such a heartfelt and heartwarming experience. It's very beautiful. It makes me feel things again.
And you can see what it could have been if the care wasn't put into this. Like,
Well, it could have been an M. Night movie.
right? Well, it could have been horrible because I've seen really bad kids movies with a similar premise.
It could have been Stewart Little 3.
We haven't seen Stewart Little 3. We don't know if it's.
I thought I've seen enough
I
of
think
Stewart
we
Little
know.
3 to know.
But yeah, Josh, best movie ever, worst movie ever.
I think this is
It's one of the movies ever.
it's the best movie ever. I'll forego the contrarian nature inside of me that is pushing to say it's the worst movie, even though I like this very much.
You know what's going to happen now, don't you? When we ask Daniel, he's going to say it's the worst
Yeah,
movie
I-
ever.
No,
No,
I
you
would
would
never
never.
do that.
No, but you were right. This is it's a very wholesome movie. Like there's not really much stress or anything in it. You know, everything's going to resolve. You know, it's like there's one moment where it gets a bit sad and it goes on a bit of a downer. But even that kind of resolves itself quite quickly. It's just it's nice. It's a nice little.
And it's that nice kind of like
Cozy.
Disney Channel sad where it's like like you know that everything's gonna be fine, so it's like it feels good to be sad
It
and then
kinda-
immediately be re-happied.
If I could describe this movie in a word, I would just say it's a cozy movie. You know,
Hmm.
it's
It is
nice.
very cozy, yeah. Even their little house that's wedged in between those two apartment buildings. It's very cozy, very quaint.
It feels like a Pixar movie in terms of its storytelling. Like it's got the Pixar kind of like things are happy at the beginning, a little sad in the middle, and then happy again at the end. It's the Pixar arc. The Pixar arc, as it were.
Good words.
Daniel, best movie ever, worst movie ever.
Best movie all time ever made. I really liked the part when Stewart Little was in the park and he totaled his car and hit two women in Scotland. And then
That's not Michael J. Fox who did that. That's Matthew Broderick.
Him.
And it was Northern Ireland.
It's just the same thing. Say it's all.
Maybe Michael J. Fox did do that in Scotland, and then at the
Yeah,
same
he might have.
time, Matthew Broderick is
He's
off in
listening
Northern
to this right now, and he's putting a hit out on me because I'm the only person who knows. No, unironically,
But
I did
Michael J.
really like
Fox
the
is the
part
only listener.
where he was in the park and the praying mantis like he had a little scuff with it because it was also shot to make it seem as if it was a giant praying mantis, even though it was, obviously praying mantis size, but also smaller than Stuart Little himself. It was just, excellent scene, shot very well. I was very intimidated by that praying mantis.
I'm gonna beat you.
Good movie.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad we watched this. I knew we were gonna enjoy it because I enjoyed the first half of it that I saw, and so that's why I suggested it. This might very well be the best movie we watch in this sweep, and I know it will be. But I also we probably should have saved it for last.
I think Yogi Bear 2's got a good.
Yogi Bear 2 is going to blow this one out of the water.
Okay. Cool. I feel like the rest of them are going to be pretty miserable to sit through because they're going to be what this movie could have been if there weren't as much care put into it as there was. I'm just glad we're not watching The Last Airbender or Old or After Earth or The Visit or The
Sir
Happening.
Billy.
We'll get there. You just wait on Sir Billy.
Next time, baby.
Next time, baby. But yeah, so I would recommend, if you haven't seen it in a while, you should watch Stewart Little.
I don't honestly say this movie's fun and let's say cozy. It's a nice little.
Even if you have watched it recently, watch it. Watch Stuart
it's the
Little.
kind of movie. It's the kind of
Watch this funny
movie.
little mouse get into shenanigans and then
It's
get
the
out
kind
of
of
them.
movie
Quirky
you
little
stick
mouse
on.
friend.
It's the kind of movie you stick on like a cold winter's night where you got the fireplace going, you got some nice soup or something. You watch it and you're having a nice little night in.
I just don't think my nice little night in is going to involve Stewart Little.
Stuart Little.
But I
Little.
appreciate the cinnamon.
I didn't add cinnamon in my soup.
What?
But I will say, like, even foregoing the rating system of best movie ever, worst movie ever, I would say unironically this is a good movie. Because there are some bad movies that I would say that about just because they're better than the worst movies I've ever seen. But this one I would say genuinely is a solid movie.
Yeah, no, I'm we joke about with our movies a lot, but this is unironically good.
Yeah.
Well done, M. Night. You have written one good movie.
All right.
True.
We're gonna get out. Any final words you want to get in before we close this thing, boys?
Stuart
has drip.
Little. He does have drip. He's got a lot of drip.
He does.
That's
Very,
what I'm-
very drippy.
that's
There's
what-
at one point
that's
he's wearing this like sweater and it goes crazy.
That's my final word on this movie. Stuart has drip.
All right. Well, I guess that's it then. We're done. We finished it. We watched a movie that wasn't directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Can you believe it?
Miserable.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Semi Pro. Hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week when we watch Yogi Bear
Bear
2.
2.
Or Yogi Bear
that's the
1,
second
because
one.
Yogi Bear 2 doesn't exist. But we'll talk about that more next week.
It does.
No.
It does.
If you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, then do whatever the YouTube things are. And we will see you next week.